Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot Daf Kaftet. Today's daf is sponsored by Belinda Craigie in loving memory of Aubrey Craigie, Avram ben Shraga Feibush on his second yahrzeit. He's remembered fondly by all his family and is greatly missed for his wisdom and advice. Okay, we're going to get started with the third chapter today, whole new topic. We're now going to learn about a very maybe unpleasant topic, I would say, about a man who rapes another woman and the penalty that he's supposed to pay as a result of him raping her. I think you have to visualize that rape in those days was a little bit different than it is nowadays, not necessarily in the act itself, but the results of the rape. In the Torah, okay, maybe we'll start with this. Okay, in the Torah, I just want to read some of the verses. In chapter 22 of Sefer Dvarim, verse 28, it says, Ki yimtza ish na'ara betula, if a man finds a woman, a young, na'ara, we'll define exactly what a na'ara is, a young woman, bitula, virgin, asher lo orasa, we're getting a lot of definitions of her. She's a na'ara, she's a bitula, she's a virgin, she's lo orasa, she was not engaged, utfasani grabs her, vishachaviman, he sleeps with her, vinimtzau, and they were found, vinatan ha'ish, I'm going to leave that word aside right now, and they were found, but vinatan ha'ish hashochev ima lavia na'ara, the person who slept with her has to give to the father of the girl. And we're going to see later in the Gemara, are there situations where she gets the money herself? Chamishim kasef, 50 money. Okay, I'm translating it specifically like this because it's not clear what type of currency we're talking about. Below, like which coin, 50 of what coins? Below tieli isha, low with a vav, meaning, and here comes the big strange thing. If you've never seen this verse, you'll find it very odd. Even if you have seen it, you'll find it odd. And she has to become his wife, basically. Tachat asherina, because he divorced her, because he tortured her, Lo yuchal shalcha kol yamav. He cannot ever divorce her. So he has to marry her. Now, to us, this sounds absolutely absurd. But again, put yourself into those days. A woman who was raped was considered, right? Even nowadays, it's a stigma if a woman was raped. But imagine in those days, it was a huge stigma. Think about a woman who wasn't a virgin was already a stigma. And if she was raped, all the more so. Because of that, this woman is going to have a very hard time not getting married, not to mention the embarrassment to her family, which explains why the father of the girl is involved here. It's a big humiliation to the family. And therefore, he's supposed to marry her in order to take care of her. And he can actually never divorce her because otherwise he'll just divorce her and leave her on the street. And now we get, okay, there's a few things still unclear here, exactly what age, how much money exactly. It says 50, it doesn't say exactly what, and all sorts of things we'll see as we go on. In the same chapter, earlier in the chapter, in verse 15, Tevav, it talks about mifateh. Mifateh is a man who seduces a woman. And then she agrees, she's willing. So now in this case, and we're talking all the time about a woman who's not married yet, otherwise it's eshet ish and then it's karet, right? They get the death penalty in the hands of God. Ki yafateh ish bitula asher lo orasa. If he seduces a virgin who is not betrothed, same thing, v'shachavima, and he sleeps with her, mohal yimharenu lo liisha. She becomes his wife, and he has to give her, right, the mohar, like the ketubah. Ima'en yima'en avia letitalo. If the father refuses to give her to this man, father's very angry. He's, no way are you marrying this, my daughter. Kesef yishkol kemo habatulo. He gets money, or he has to pay money, right? The man who seduced her, like the mohar of the betulot, like the money that is given to the betulot. We don't exactly know how to understand this yet. We're going to see what this is as we go on. Here, notice it says kesef yishkol. It doesn't say how much kesef. Yishkol comes from the language of shkalim. So the type of coin seems to be clear here, but not how much of the coin. So that's the introduction to this topic. And what we're going to start with is Elu na'arot sheyesh lahem knas. These are na'arot who get knas, meaning there are going to be, and we'll see the parallel Mishnah later, not today, which is these na'arot do not get knas for various reasons. Okay, one of the reasons we're going to see, which is a major topic of our chapter, which is a major topic in general in the Gemara, again, sort of connected with Masechet Sanhedrin and the punishments and the way it goes in the courts. There's a principle in halacha called kim le b'derabamine, or kam le b'derabamine, which means if someone's supposed to get two punishments, then they always get the one that's the more severe. Okay, this comes up. Okay, so for example, the main example is if you're liable for the death penalty for something and by the courts, and you also were supposed to pay money for what you did. Okay, so for example, this is all derived from a verse in the Torah. It talks about ki natsu anashim, if two men are fighting, and in the middle of their fight comes in this pregnant woman. It's a pasuk in Shemot, chapter 21, verse 22. V'nagfu shahara, and they end up hitting her. V'yatzu yiladar, and her children, meaning her, she loses the fetus. Below ason, and there isn't a tragedy, right? You might think that's pretty much a tragedy, but according to Torah, right, again, have a lot having to do with this Roe versus Wade, the Torah does not view the fetus as a viable, right, as a live being yet, so at least to this extent, that you're not liable the death penalty for having killed the fetus. Below ason means, but you didn't kill the woman. Okay, if the woman is killed, then it's a whole different story. But if you didn't kill the woman, you pay money. Now, what they derive from here is if there was an ason and you killed the woman, then you'd be liable the death penalty. And then you wouldn't have to pay the money. So from there, they learn that you get the harsher of the two punishments. When it comes to what about lashes and money? Okay, so there's a pasuk by lashes, which says you get lashes kidei reshato, as right, according to your bad thing that you did. And they learn from there, you don't get punished for two bad things, meaning you don't get punished double, which means you also don't get lashes and pay. There's a debate, which we'll see in the Gemara later, about which one you get then. Do you get the lashes, or do you have to pay? The obvious unfair element of this whole law is that if you're let's say the woman who got raped, or the family of the woman who got raped, if he does something, right, he raped you and he's liable the death penalty by the hands of the court. For example, let's say you're one of the arayot, the forbidden relationships, of which the court can institute a punishment. So then he'll get that punishment and he won't pay you and you won't get your knas, which seems a little bit unfair to the victim. But the person who did it, we basically say we're not going to double punish you. Okay. So it's a very interesting concept. There's a lot to be said about it. You can look it up and research and find articles about it. It's very fascinating. Let's start learning. So we're going to deal with it a lot throughout our chapter. Elu na'arot sheyesh lam knas. So the following na'arot, pay attention, na'arot they call them, as it says in the Torah. Seems like young women. We're going to talk about, maybe we'll already get into it now. There's a ketana, which is a minor, which is someone who's right from the age of birth until she has two simanim, right? She has two pubic hairs that grow, usually around the age of 12. Then she becomes a na'ara for a 6-month period after she has two pubic hairs. After those 6 months pass, she's already called a bogeret, okay, which means she's already mature. Okay, even though you might say 12 and a half is not exactly mature yet, but yes, she's mature at that point. Any 12 and a half year olds listening, maybe you might think that's mature. So these are the girls that have knas, okay? Now we're going to see. So notice, number one, we already see they have to be na'arot according to our Mishnah. I'm going to split the Mishnah into 3 parts, 3 categories. One is mamzeret netina kuti. These are all women that you can't marry. They're what we call psul lavo bakal. Lo yavo mamzer bakal Hashem, right? You're not allowed to marry a mamzer, right? Or mamzeret, which is basically a woman born from a forbidden relationship. Like, for example, a woman who is married. That's the classic example. And when she's married to one person, she has a child with some other man. Netina, those are the people who converted in the times of Yoshua, but they faked us out that they were not from one of the local 7 nations. And in order to save their lives, they pretended they were from far. We let them convert. And then it turns out they duped us. So those people you're not allowed to marry. Ve'alakuti, right? They're called netinim because it says in the pasuk, right? Rashi actually tells us this here. We talked about this in Yevamot. Vayitneim Yehoshua chot ve'etzim b'shavei mayim, right? He turned them into our servants. Vayitneim, so the language netinim comes from that pasuk that he placed them as. Ve'kutit, okay, kutit, there's a big debate. Obviously, our Mishnah holds on one side of that debate, whether the kutim, those were the shomronim, the people who were brought by this Assyrians, when the Assyrians sent the Jews out of the Israelite kingdom, they brought other nations to live there. Kutim were the people who, that's the name, they're called also Shomronim, because they came to live in Shomron, and then they started dying. These lions came and attacked them, and they found a Jew to teach them the laws of the land, and they started keeping the laws of the land. Some people say they were true legitimate converts. Some people say, no, they were not. They converted out of fear. That's not a reason to accept them as converts. They're not really converts, and then they would be forbidden to marry. So if someone rapes one of these women, he's still going to have to pay her a knas, even though theoretically he's not allowed to marry that woman, right? You might have thought, lo tiyeh isha, well, he can't marry her, so maybe there's no knas. No, there is knas, and we're going to see why later in the Gemara. Second category, if he sleeps with a gioret, or a convert. Now, this all has to do with she has to be a virgin. Now, if someone converted or was taken into captivity or was a maidservant, that was redeemed or converted or freed. Remember, if a Canaanite slave maidservant gets freed, she becomes Jewish. The shvuya, if she was freed, but maybe she was raped already, right? We assume that was the whole last section. And a gioret, right? She converted, so she wasn't Jewish before. So they're all assume if it's under the age of 3 that this all happened, then if someone actually did rape them, or sleep with them, it's not considered anything, because only at age 3 are sexual relations considered something. Okay, until then, it's not. 3 is the cutoff age. It's very strange, very difficult to understand why they chose 3, but they chose something, and that was the date. That was the age they chose. And it's already considered that she's not going to be a virgin anymore if she had relations, and therefore, if it was under 3 that all this happened, and she was already Jewish, then we're not. Right? There's an assumption that if she was taken into captivity, assumption she was raped. If she was a maidservant or a non-Jew, it could be that someone slept with her. Right? Jews, we know, are careful not to do that, but non-Jews, we can assume they might have slept around. Again, age of 3 makes it very hard to understand. If you say maybe age of 9, 10, I don't know, whatever, maybe more likely, but that was the age they chose. So now that's second category. Third category. Now we get into all sorts of arayot, forbidden relations. Habalachoto, balachotavi, balachotimo, balachotishto, okay, his sister, or his father's sister, or his mother's sister, or right, these are all classic arayot that you get karet for, or achotishto, his brother's wife, or al eshet achiv, okay, he rapes his brother. Achotishto, his sister. I got confused. His wife's sister, if he rapes her, or eshet achiv, or his brother's wife. Val eshet achi aviv, his father's brother's wife, right, his aunt through marriage. Ve'al hanida, a woman who is in nida, who you can also sleep with. Yesh lahem knas, af al pi shehem bihi karet, even though you get karet for them. Ein behem mitat beitin. The beitin doesn't come and kill you. Because of that, there's no law of kimle b'derabamine, and therefore, since it's a God-inflicted punishment, there is a knas. So the Gemara starts off and says, "Hane narot psulot ilu knas kshirot lo." This is very strange. This Mishnah. What happened to regular women? Regular Jewish woman. She's not mentioned in here. Why not? So the Gemara says, "Well, hachikara." This is what the Mishnah meant to say. Elu narot psulot sheyesh lam knas. Habala mazer, habala netina, habala kuti. It's not, this Mishnah isn't coming to tell you which women get knas. This Mishnah is coming to tell you which disqualified women, or women that you might not have thought get knas. Obviously, a regular woman who's a nara gets knas. Now the Gemara talks about the nara element. Nara in, ktana lo, right? Sounds like only if she's a nara, only in the 6-month period between when she has 2 pubic hairs until she becomes what we call a bogeret, a mature woman. So man Tana, who's the Tana who says this? That it's not, you don't pay knas for a ketana, for someone who's under the age of 12 and 2 simanim. Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Rabbi Meir, he says it's Rabbi Meir, Detanya, ketana mi bat yom echad ba'ad shtavi shtei sha'arot, yesh la mechel, ve'en la knas. Rabbi Meir is going to connect between 2 laws. A father is allowed to, again, hard concept to understand, sell his daughter into slavery. Now, when he sold his daughter into slavery, there was an assumption that likely the master or the son of the master would marry her. It was a way that very poor people would take care of their daughters, sell them off at a young age, right? Instead, since they couldn't give them a big dowry, so the woman would work for them and then basically become their wife. So, and if not, she would go free. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all the details there. The question is, at what age could she do that? Whatever age that's allowed, which is yesh la mechel, is not the age where knas comes in if he were to rape her, okay? If a random man were to rape her, okay? Why they're correlated is a good question, food for thought, but let's just go through what the Gemara says. So, according to Rabbi Meir, Tanami bat yom echad, from the day she's born, ad shtavish shtei sarot, until she has 2 pubic hairs, yesh la mecher. She can be sold into slavery. Ve'ein la knas, but she doesn't have knas, meaning if someone were to rape her in that time, they wouldn't pay the father knas, she's too young. This time period called the Na'ara time period, till she matures, from the beginning of maturity till those 6 months. That's what Rabbi Meir says. In those 6 months, he would pay the knas if somebody rapes her, but she can't be sold into slavery. If they'll say the father didn't sell her until that point, it's too late. Shaya Rabbi Meir Omer, he would say, when there's mecher, there's no knas. And there is knas, there is no mecher. Okay, those two are mutually exclusive. The Chachamim omrim, tanami bat 3 shanim v'yom achav ad shetibager yesh la knas. No, from the age of 3, when she's what we call re'uya lebiyah, right, where sexual relation with her could be counted as actual sexual relations. Then from that age until she reaches maturity, right, the 6 months beyond hitting puberty, yesh la knas. That whole time period, if somebody rapes her, he has to pay the knas. That's not what our Mishnah says, because our Mishnah said elu na'arot, right? But this is, no, even at a younger age. So to which the Gemara says, knas mecher lo, what? He can't sell her that whole time period, right? He can only sell her from age 0 to 3, right? Because if we assume they're connected, that when there's knas, there's no mecher. When there's mecher, there's no knas. Well, the Gemara says, ema, turning now to Amubet, af knas bimkom mecher. No. Knas and mecher overlap. Now, they don't overlap entirely, right? Because again, from 0 to 3, you can do mecher, but not knas. From 3 and up till she becomes a bogeret, till she becomes a na'ara, till she has 2 simanim, you can do both, knas and mecher, and you can sell her. From the age of 12 and 2 simanim, for 6 months, there's only knas, there's no longer mecher. So they overlap for part of the time, and each one has a little time that it's relevant without the other. Now the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute. Why did these women get knas? Right? For the category 1 and category 3 in the Mishnah, the Mamzeret Nitinan and Kutib, and all the Arayot, it says in the Pasuk, V'lo tieh isha, lo with a vav, right? And to him, she will be a wife. He's supposed to marry her. Isha harewuyala, which means a woman who he can marry. Seems like knas is not relevant if you can't marry the woman. So Amar Rish Lakish, we're going to have 2 different ways of darshaning this. One Rish Lakish, one Rav Papa. Then we're going to ask, why didn't he hold like him? Why didn't he hold like him? After all that, we're going to basically come up with a new way of understanding the 2 of them as a merged approach. But right now, we're going to understand them separately. Na'ara, na'ara, hanara. If you look at the psukim about the rapist, it says, Ki matzeh ish na'ara betula, right? If he finds a woman who is a na'ara, that's one. In the next pasuk, it says, and he has to give to the father of the na'ara, we split into 2. It's the word na'ara, and it's also hana'ara, the na'ara. So that counts as 2, even though it's really only 1. So 3 mentions of the word na'ara in the verses. So comes Rish Lakish and says, why 3? Chad legufe, one for itself, to teach you she has to be a na'ara, as we saw in the Mishnah, again, against the other opinion that thought she doesn't have to be. One is to say, even if it's a low taseh, like for example, a mamzer, natina, right? Those are all low tasehs. And one is to say, even if it's chayav kari. In other words, all these extra words now are coming to include more cases, even though lo tieh lisha would seem to preclude those cases, extra na'arot come to include those cases. Rav Papa Amal, he's going to learn it from the mefata cases, from the seduction cases, where she's a willing participant. Bitula, bitulot, ha-bitulot, same kind of thing. It says, ki fateh ish bitula, a man seduces a bitula, number 1, a virgin. Next pasuk says, if the father doesn't want to give her to marriage to this man, then kesef yishkol kimor ha-bitulot. Again, ha-bitulot counts as 2. Bitulot, and then with the combination of the hey, ha-yidiyah, the betula. So we have, again, 3 mentions of betula, even though, again, to our eye, it's really 2. But again, he's going to say the same idea. Chad legufe, one for itself, to say she has to be a virgin. Chad la tuye chayve lavim, another is to say if she's forbidden to him by lavim, like mamzer natim. and mamzeret netina, and chalatu yachayve kritut, and all the arayot that are chayve kritut. So now, Rav Papa, my tamilo amar Krish Lakish. Why didn't you like Krish Lakish and learn it from Nara, Nara, Hanara? Be better. That was in the ones category and not in the seduction psukim. He needs that. One of the betulot is not free. He needs it for a different drasha. Once one of them isn't free, we can't learn all these things from it. Right? We can learn some of them, but not all of them. Ta'amar Abaye, what's the drasha of Abaye? Ba aleha umeta. What if he rapes her and then she dies, right? Whether she dies because of the rape or whether she dies just randomly, patul, he'll be exempt. Shenema, how do we get it? V'natan la'avi ha'ne'ara. You give it to the father of this na'ara. They learn from here, avi na'ara, v'lo la'avi meta. It's the father of the na'ara, assuming she's still alive. If she's dead, then he doesn't have to pay. The Rish Lakish, my time alone, armor Karav Papa. So again, he needed Betula for this other drasha, and that's why now. So now Rish Lakish, why didn't he say like Rav Papa, which is Betula, right? Betulot ha Betulot. He needs that for some other drasha, for Xera Shava. Xera Shava is when the same word appears in two places. Now Betula appear by the ones, and the Betula appears by the mefateh. So now they say, and this goes back to something I particularly mentioned when we were reading the psukim about missing information. Ditanya. Kesef yishkol kimora habtula. In the mefata case, the seducer, it says he has to pay kesef yishkol shkalim kesef, right? So it doesn't say how many. So they say here shehezeh kimor habtula. This is like the money one has to pay to the bitula in the rape case, which is 50. That's how you know it's 50. And now we know the currency. The currency is shkalim, which is actually 200 dinar, 200 zuzim, which is the amount of a ketubah. Umar habetulot kazeh. And now with the onus, if you remember in the rapist case, it said she has to pay 50 kesef. But I'm sorry, he has to pay 50 kesef. Didn't say how much, what coins. Okay. So umar habetulot kazeh. The Xera Shava works in both directions. The shkalim we're going to learn out from the seducing case. So from the seducer, we learn shkalim. From the rapist, we learn 50. And from there, we learn both of them have to pay this 50 shkalim, which is equal to the 200 zuz that we pay in the ketubah. So now, because a shekel is worth 4 dinarim or zuzim, it's the same thing. So he needs the betulot for the Xera Shava, so they're not free for this drasha. So now they say, okay, but now we're stuck because Rish Lakish nami m'vayle l'chidabaye, Rav Papa nami m'vayle l'Xera Shava. The Xera Shava and the law of Abaye need to be learned by everybody. So neither one should have those words free, to which they do a combination here. Ela shita kraiktive. There's really 6 extra words here. There's na'ara, hanara, betula, betulot, habetulot. That's 6 altogether. Tre legufayu, 2 are to teach you, right? 1, that she has to be a na'ara. The other one, that she has to be a virgin. And chal l'chidabaye, 1 to say she has to be alive. Chal l'Xera Shava, to teach you how much money. And iyatu le'tre, we have 2 left. Okay, 1 for the lavs, 1 for the kritu, and that's how we get to our Mishnah. Now they want to point out that not everybody agrees with our Mishnah. We already saw that not everybody agrees about the na'ara, and maybe it could even be a ketana. Now we're going to see that not everybody agrees that these women get knas. So, la'afuki mehai tana, it's also to differentiate from other tanaim who held differently. Ditanya, vilot yelisha, when they say he has to marry her, we darshan Shimanatim Niomel, and this relates to a whole sugya we learned in Yevamot also. Isha sheyesh b'havaya. It has to be a woman who you could potentially marry. Meaning, we learned this term many times in Yevamot. Kiddushin tofsin. It has to be that if you were to betroth her, the betrothal would be valid. There's certain women that you marry that the betrothal is not valid. There's actually a debate about which ones, like an arayo. So you marry your sister, has karet. Everybody agrees there's no kiddushin tofsin. Some people say also if it's chayve mita beitin, if it's an arayot that you get killed by the court, also there's no kiddushin. Some people say, we're going to see later today, that Rabbi Akiva holds, even in chayve lavim, ain't kiddushin tofsim. Most people think it is. Okay, but Rabbi Akiva has this unique shita that if you marry, let's say a mamzeret, the marriage is not valid at all. It's like you're not married. Okay, in kiddushin tofsim. So now, and that also relates to that the vlad is going to be a mamzer. If you're married in that way, even though it doesn't mean anything, your child is then a mamzer, okay? Because you're doing a marriage that's forbidden to be, right, and it can't work, so the child's a mamzer. We don't normally say the chayve lavim have your kids are mamzerim, unless, of course, it's a mamzer. You married a mamzer, then the kids are mamzerim. But if a Kohen marries a divorcee, which is forbidden, the child's not a mamzer. Okay, Rabbi Akiva held the child was a mamzer. Okay, again, there's a bit of a debate about which ones Rabbi Akiva holds it about. Anyway, we'll get back to that. So now the Gemara says, our Mishnah disagrees with Rabbi Shimon HaTimni because he said, Isha sheyesh ba'avaya, you wouldn't give a knas if in Kiddushin Tofsim, like Chayve Kritu. Okay? Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe omer Isha ruya l'kaima. It has to be a woman who you can stay married to. Now, that sounds the same as Havaya. What's the difference? That's going to be our big question. My benai, we're going to have several answers to this question. What's the difference between Rabbi Shimon HaTimni and Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe? Some of this is going to continue into tomorrow's sukkah. Okay, the main point right now is they disagree with the Tan of our Mishnah because they wouldn't have all the cases mentioned in our Mishnah. So what's the difference between them? Amar Rabbi Zera Mamzeret Unetina Ika Benai. Laman Damar Yesh Bahavaya Hanami Yesh Bahavaya. Mamzeret Unetina Kiddushin or Tofsim. That's what I told you before. It is a valid marriage. You're not allowed to do it. So in that case, he would have to pay the knas for them. But right, even according to Isha Sheyesh Bahavaya, Shimon HaTimni says has to have Havaya. That would include a mamzeret and netina. But you can't stay married to her. You might say kiddushin are valid, but you're not allowed to stay married to her. You can't marry a mamzeret or a netina. So if you marry them, you can't stay married. So he would exclude those women because they're not ra'oi l'kaima. So Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe would exclude them from knas. Rabbi Shimon HaTimni would include them in knas. Shimon HaTimni wouldn't have the arayot, but he would have the mamzeret and the netina. But Rabbi Akiva, now I told you we get it. Rabbi Akiva damar en kiddushin tovsim b'chai ve'lavin, which means mamzeret and netina don't have kiddushin tovsim either, which means they wouldn't have havaya, they wouldn't have enor oil l'kaima, they would be the same. So according to him, how would he read this machloka between Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and Rabbi Shimon HaTimni? Because they seem to be saying the same thing. My benayu. So what's the difference between them? Ika benayu amana l'kohen gadol k'Rabbi Simai. So now we're going to see that there were different interpretations of Rabbi Akiva. When he said en kiddushin tovsim b'chai ve'lavim, did he mean all chai ve'lavim, like mamzerim and netinim and kohanim who can't marry, or was he only talking about mamzerim and netinim and not kohanim who can't marry certain women? So ika benayu amana l'kohen gadol, like a widow to a kohen gadol would be excluded. Okay, meaning he would pay a knas. If kohen gadol raped an alana or any of the kohen relationships that are forbidden, they would have to pay the knas according to him and not according to Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. This is all according to Rabbi Simai's interpretation of Rabbi Akiva. Ki Rabbi Simai, Detanya, Rabbi Simai Omer, Min Kol Oseh Rabbi Akiva Mamzerim, every forbidden relationship is a mamzer, other than Chutz Mi'amana L'Kohen Gadol, Sham Hare Amra Torah, because in that case the Torah said, Lo Yikach, don't marry her, V'lo Yichalel, because if you do, right, lest you come to make the children chalalim, right, and make the wife a halala. From here you learn the children are halalim, but they're not mamzerim. They're not mamzerim. It's because kiddushin or tofsim. Because again, Kiva thinks anytime you can't marry, and kiddushin tofsim, and then the kids are mamzerim. So here they say the kids are not mamzerim; they're only halalim, which would mean the Rabbi Kiva thinks the kiddushin or tofsim in that case, which means that would be the difference between Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and Rabbi Shimon HaTimni. Again, Rabbi Shimon HaTimni would see isha sheyesh lahavaya. Well, there is knas because there is havaya here with an amanah kohen gadol. If a kohen gadol raped a widow, there would be havaya. So that would be knas. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe would say, no, he's not ra'oi l'kaima, so there's no penalty, there's no knas. But that's all if you hold like Rabbi Simai. Ule Rabbi Yeshevav, who has a different interpretation of Rabbi Akiva, who said, Da'amar, bo v'nitzvach al Akiva ben Yosef, let us scream at him, because what a crazy approach. Remember, you have to think about how many extra mamzerim he was creating. See why people were upset with him. Shaya omer, kol she'en lo biyav Yisrael avlav mamzer, because he would say any kind of forbidden relationship, the vlad is a mamzer, meaning including an amanah l'kohen gadol. Then my benayu, what's the difference between them? Ika benayu, I won't leave you stranded. We'll start in the next step for a quick second. Chayve ase mitzri ve'edomi. If you remember, we learned this in Yevamot. There's levels, right? There's kritut, there's mitabetin, the court inflicts penalty. There's lavim, which are just forbidden, negative commandments. And then there's messing up an ase, meaning, what does that mean? It means a lav that comes from an ase, a negative commandment that's derived from a positive. It says in the Torah, when a convert comes from an Egyptian or Edomite, you're not allowed to marry first or second generation, but you can marry third generation. So it doesn't actually say in the Torah you can't marry first and second. It only says if you have a convert that's Mitzri and Edomi, then the third generation of that convert is allowed to marry in. From there, you can derive they can't marry first or second generation, which means that according to Rabbi Akiva, that would be a case where Kiddushin or Tofsim, because it's only a messing up an assay, but there's no, right, there, you're not Ra'oi L'Kaima, you're not allowed to stay married to them if you marry a first or second generation. And again, that would be a nafkamina, a difference halacha between Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya and Rabbi Shimon HaTimni. We'll end here for today, and we'll continue with this into tomorrow's daf with some more questions on this. Wishing everybody a great day.